Glorious day. What's up and welcome back to another episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. Today we're talking about 4 of the biggest and most powerful laptops that money can buy, and all of these are going to be super expensive. At the highest end configurations, you're starting at $38.99 for the Scar 18s, and the pricing just goes up from there. Now, I know many of you are actually in the process of trying to pre-order these laptops now before they sell out, because if you don't buy them right now, you might be waiting 2 months before you can get your hands on one. So many of us laptop buyers just go ahead and try to buy one right away and then return it if it ends up being kind of sucky or not as good as we had thought or hoped. So today we're going to talk about all of the stuff that we do know about these 4 laptops: the Scar 18, the Blade 18, the MSI GT77, and the Alienware M18. So these laptops are big, they're beefy, and man, can they pack a punch. They should be some of the highest performing gaming laptops that money can buy in 2023. Now, I've spent a ton of time gathering all of this data and putting it together for you. So if you find this video helpful, slam that like button. And if you don't want to miss out on all of the live stream benchmarking, unboxing, and full reviews with detailed benchmarking, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let's go ahead and dive into this. Here we go. So the first and most important aspect that you need to understand about these 4 laptops is that there is a pretty big difference in size between these laptops. The Razer Blade 18 comes in at 7.05 pounds and has a total volume of 146.73 square inches. The Scar 18 comes in at 6.83 pounds, our lightest laptop out of these 4, and has a total volume of 165.4 square inches, which is 12% larger than the Blade 18. Now, the MSI GT77 is 7.27 pounds and 184 square inches, which is now 25% larger than the Blade 18, and the Alienware M18 can go up to 9.3 pounds when it's all maxed out with everything in it, and has a total square inch volume when calculating with the thinnest part of the volume at 0.95 of 193.2 square inches, which is 32% larger than the Blade 18. So there's up to a 32% difference in size between these laptops. So to me, I find this very impressive that the Blade 18 is even in this comparison in the first place. And kudos to the Razer engineers that have put this much power in such a smaller overall profile and package. And kudos to the Asus engineers who also managed to make the Scar 18 the lightest of these 4 laptops. So let's talk about thermal design. The top 2 laptops with the MSI GT77 get a 100% rating along with the Alienware M18. The Scar 18 and Blade 18 I give a 95% thermal rating to them. So why did I rate these laptops as I did? Let's talk about it. The GT77 can do 250 watts of continuous load between the CPU and GPU in a combined workload, which is just insane. This is as claimed by MSI, not as we have tested it, right? So that's very important to test all of the claims from these manufacturers. Now, it's supposed to be able to go up to 152 watt continuous CPU only load, and MSI even claims that you should be able to raise the TDP higher if you do have the cooling headroom, which hopefully there actually is the cooling headroom. 152 watts is a ton of power to the CPU, and we need it this year because it's a 24 core part with 8 performance cores and 16 efficiency cores for all of these laptops. So the more TDP we can put into these laptop CPUs, the more performance we're going to get back out of them. Now, the GT77 combines 4 fans with a bunch of heat pipes and a huge rear exhaust. The entire back of the laptop is dedicated for exhausts. We don't know the thermal compound that MSI is using on the laptops. It may be liquid metal, it may be a traditional thermal paste. We don't know yet. Now, the Alienware M18 is a 250 watt continuous GPU CPU combined load. I'm guessing it's a 75 watt CPU, 175 watt GPU load. It's the only way that would make sense how to divide that up. And we don't know what the CPU only load max TDP is. We'll just have to see. Now, the M18 has a quad fan design, has exhaust on the sides, a little more focused on that, and we do have vapor chamber cooling. The Alienware M18 is the only laptop on this list that has ports on the rear of the device, if that matters to you, because all the other laptops use the rear of the device as the fan exhaust area. Alienware is using the Element 31 liquid metal to maximize the cooling on the M18. The Scar 18 features 240 watts of continuous dual load with 65 watts to the CPU and 175 watts to the GPU. And when in a CPU only load, you're getting 145 watts continuous with a burst up to 175 until the long power limit kicks in. Now you get a tri-fan, 3-fan design with the entire rear of the laptop dedicated to heat exhaust, so no ports on the back. And there is Conductonaut Extreme liquid metal, which is a pure gallium type of liquid metal, which should improve temperatures more than traditional liquid metal. Now for the Blade 18, we don't know what the combined continuous TDP output is. If I were to guess, it's probably 230 or 240, but we don't know for sure yet. We do know the GPU goes up to 175 watts when under a GPU load and up to 120 watts when under a CPU only load. Now there is a 3-fan design with vapor chamber cooling, and we do have liquid metal, and the rear exhaust actually goes up and hits the screen and kind of bounces off of it, which is a bit of a different design, but so far we haven't seen that damage the display in past Razer laptops, so I'm not worried about that. Now overall, the MSI GT77 and Alienware M18 have the better cooling solutions, with the MSI GT77 making the better claims on performance, noticeably. So we'll have to actually get to testing these though to verify the performance numbers and make sure the GT77 actually meets the performance claims that MSI has said. So what about the display options you can get with these laptops? Well, for the MSI GT77, you get a 4K 144Hz 16:9 1000 nits mini LED display. This has 100% DCI-P3 color gamut. It's going to be super bright, super vibrant, but the thing to keep in mind with mini LED is that HDR content is really required to reach the full brightness of the display. But the good thing here is that many movies and many modern video games do support HDR content, but not so much for the older types of games. The Scar 18 features a QHD Plus 240Hz 16:10 500 nits 100% DCI-P3 color gamut with Dolby Vision support, which is an additional higher level of color gamut. I think the Scar 18 and Blade 18 both have the same quality of display. It might even be the exact same panel, we don't know yet, but I personally, being an esports gamer, would find that the Blade 18 and Scar 18 QHD 240Hz to be a little bit more desirable than the 4K 144Hz, because it's easier to push frames out at 240Hz QHD than it is at 4K 144Hz. But I think content creators, movie watchers, and more casual gamers that don't need the ultra high refresh rate are really going to prefer that 4K 144Hz mini LED display. Sadly, the Alienware M18 has QHD 165Hz 16:10 300 plus nits brightness display, but the color gamut is really good at 100% DCI-P3 color gamut. So overall, the M18 display is far from bad, but it's just not as good as the competition this year, and I'm hoping the price of the Alienware M18 will be reduced to compensate for this lower quality display, but we'll have to see because we don't have official pricing yet from Alienware. Now for memory, the Blade 18 features DDR5 5600 MHz, which is the fastest RAM out of these 4 laptops. You get 2x SODIMM slots. The Scar 18 also has 2x SODIMM slots, but DDR5 4800 MHz RAM. The GT77 comes in with a whopping 4 SODIMM slots, but they're DDR5 3600 or 4000 MHz RAM. So the RAM speed is not as fast, but the additional slots make me wonder if it could potentially go faster. We need to do actual testing to see if having 4 SODIMM slots allows the GT77 to have better memory performance, or if we're just actually slower on the memory side of things, but everything else is faster. We don't really know. The Alienware M18 also has 2 SODIMM slots with DDR5 4800 MHz RAM. Obviously, most users aren't going to need 128 gigs of RAM, but there are some out there that will want that and who will also want the future proofing of having massive amounts of RAM, especially if you're a complex content creator like an animator or potentially a game developer. Maybe having that massive amount of RAM could actually be beneficial. Now, the build quality is 100% on the Blade 18. It has an all-metal unibody design with the highest possible quality. Like, it is firm, it is rigid with minimal flex. The unibody design, I just love it. It also helps make the laptop a bit thinner and potentially lighter than a multi-metal compartmentalized body chassis instead. The Scar 18 is mostly high quality plastic with a metal lid, and so is the GT77. But the Alienware M18 is supposed to be an all metal chassis, but it's not a unibody design, so it's probably not going to be quite as rigid as the Blade 18. The biggest downside, in my opinion, for a unibody metal chassis like on the Blade 18 or perhaps the M18 is that the heat tends to transfer throughout the chassis, making the handrests or the whole laptop just very warm and hot to the touch. So imagine if you're trying to edit a video on a warm bus or on an airplane or something, and you've got this hot laptop in your lap in a place that's already warm. Ooh, it can be really brutal. Now, the high quality plastic chassis used in the GT77 and Scar 18, the main advantage to that is that it doesn't transfer heat as much. So it makes it so that the keyboard deck and the overall feel of the machine doesn't tend to heat up and become like a giant heat sink. To me, that's the biggest advantage of going with a plastic chassis. So what about the price of these laptops and bang for the buck value? Let's take a look. Now, the Blade 18 for $44.99 comes with an i9-13950HX, an RTX 4090, 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM, and a 2 terabyte SSD. Now for $38.99, the Scar 18 comes with an i9-13980HX, which is a slightly higher spec, higher bin processor than the 13950HX. Of course, it comes with an RTX 4090, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 2 terabyte SSD. For $52.99, the GT77 comes with an i9-13980HX, again the highest end processor, an RTX 4090, and a whopping 128 gigs of DDR5 RAM with 4 terabytes of storage. Now the Alienware M18, now we don't have the pricing on the RTX 4090 variant of the Alienware M18, but the 4080 version comes in at $28.99 for an i9-13900HX, an RTX 4080, 32 gigs of DDR5 4800 MHz RAM, and a 1 terabyte SSD. So I imagine the RTX 4090 version is obviously going to be several $100s more. And then if you were to get the higher end processor, that'll also be a few $100s more. Now the Blade 18, Scar 18, and GT77 only came into stock for a short period of time and then they sold out. So if you don't want to miss out on when they come back in stock, be sure to check my list and hit the follow button because I'll be putting out notifications for when each laptop comes back in stock and is available for ordering. So there's a link in the description if you want to check out that gaming laptop list after this video. Now the Blade 18 features a 5 megapixel webcam, Windows Hello, has a mux switch, G-Sync, Advanced Optimus, per key RGB lighting, and a Razer light up logo on the back. The Scar 18 has a 720p webcam, which is a bit disappointing for such an expensive and nice machine. It also features Windows Hello, mux switch, G-Sync, Advanced Optimus, and front and rear RGB light strips, per key RGB, and a light up logo. The MSI GT77 has a 720p webcam as well, which is a bit disappointing. We need to actually check the quality of these webcams because megapixels doesn't tell the whole story. Windows Hello, mux switch, it's missing G-Sync and Advanced Optimus, which is what hurt the premium score rating on the GT77. We do have rear RGB lights and an MSI light up logo, as well as per key RGB backlighting on that Cherry MX keyboard. Now the Alienware M18 has a 1080p webcam, Windows Hello, a mux switch, Advanced Optimus, per key RGB, a rear RGB Tron light, which looks pretty freaking sick, and an Alienware light up logo. Overall, the Alienware M18 and Scar 18 seem to have the best premium feature set between all these laptops. The Blade 18 isn't far behind. I've docked it only 5% because it has lower levels of RGB lighting, but that may not matter to many of you out there. So it just depends on the individual user here. Otherwise, it would be a 100% premium rating for the Blade 18. Now the Scar 18, I've put at a 95% premium rating because it docked at 5 points for the lower quality webcam. Now, when it comes to keyboard and mouse, the Blade 18 features the best touchpad you can buy on a gaming laptop, but the key keyboard feels a bit cramped for an 18-inch device. It is nice and centered, but there is no numpad or function buttons. The Scar 18 has an excellent touchpad and a great keyboard with full functionality and spacing, but it's not quite as nice as what the Blade 18 has for the touchpad especially. The GT77 has a great touchpad, though again, not as big as the Blade 18, and the Cherry MX mechanical keyboard does help boost the keyboard scores. Now, the Alienware M18 should also be a great touchpad. We'll have to see. I didn't get to test the M18 when I was at CES, but it does also feature a Cherry MX mechanical keyboard, which again should hopefully be a joy to type on. Now for storage options, the Blade 18 and Scar 18 both have two M.2 PCIe Gen 4 slots, while the GT77 features one PCIe Gen 5 and two PCIe Gen 4 slots for a total of three M.2s, which is fantastic, better than most of the laptops out there. But the Alienware M18 features a whopping four M.2 slots, so if you need a ton of storage, then the Alienware M18 is going to be the cheapest option to rack up the most storage. Now for battery size, the Blade 18 and Scar 18 come in at 90 watt hours. The GT77 maxes out that battery size at 99 watt hours, and the Alienware M18 has 97 watt hours. The thing to keep in mind is the GT77 has that mini LED display, which is not that battery friendly, and I would expect it to reduce the battery life of the laptop by at least 5 to 10%. We'll have to actually test that and find out for sure though. Let's talk about ports. The Blade 18 features a ton of ports with 3 USB-As, a Thunderbolt 4, a USB-C, HDMI 2.1, a UHS 2 full-size SD card slot, which is super fast. So if you're a content creator and you need to transfer a ton of 4K footage, that's going to be a great SD card slot for you. It also has a 2.5 gig Ethernet and a headphone port. For the Scar 18, the ports are kind of lacking. We only have a total of 4 USB inputs, 2 USB-As, a Thunderbolt 4, and a USB-C, and then an HDMI 2.1, a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and a headset port. So the main drawbacks here is less USBs and no full-size SD card slot for the Scar 18, which to me is going to make the Scar 18 a little bit less appealing to content creators that need that full-size SD card slot. Now the MSI GT77 features 3 USB-As, 2 Thunderbolt 4s, a mini display port, an HDMI 2.1, a full-size SD card slot, though we need to test how fast that SD card slot is, a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, and a headset port. The Alienware M18 features 3 USB-As, 2 Thunderbolt 4s, another USB-C, a mini display port, an HDMI 2.1, a full-size SD card slot, again, not sure about the speed, 2.5 gig Ethernet port, and a headset port. To summarize, the Alienware M18 and the GT77 have the best ports, but the Razer Blade 18 is right there with them. To summarize all of this up, the MSI GT77 and Alienware M18 have a design that caters towards a desktop replacement. We're gonna go for max speed, we're gonna make it bigger, thicker, deeper, heavier than the other 18-inch machines. And because of that, they were able to increase the TDP and put in mechanical keyboards as well. The Scar 18 straddles that line of portability and full performance really well. Question number 1, how portable do you want this to be? Do you want a desktop replacement that you barely move? Then you probably want to lean towards something like the GT77 or the Alienware M18. Now, if size does matter and you want to be able to take this laptop around with you, the Blade 18 and Scar 18 have smaller bezels and much smaller overall footprint, allowing it to fit into more backpacks and be lighter weight and travel with you more. Question number 2, does webcam quality matter to you? If it does, then the Blade 18 or potentially the Alienware M18 does have an advantage here. Does the amount of storage and storage speed matter a lot to you? Then you're probably going to want to go with the GT77 or Alienware M18. Do you need more ports? Then you probably should avoid the Scar 18 and go with one of the other 3 options. Do you play a ton of esports games? If you do, then you probably want to avoid the GT77 because it only goes up to 144 Hertz. Question number 6, do you want to maximize your CPU performance, or does CPU performance not really matter except in games? If CPU performance matters to you a lot, then I would probably try to avoid the Blade 18 because its CPU performance, especially in CPU only loads, should be noticeably less than the other 3 laptops on this list. If I were to guess right now, I would guess the GT77 should have the best all-around CPU performance between these three. Now, I'm really looking forward to benchmarking these laptops and reviewing them. So if you don't want to miss out on these reviews and benchmarks, again, be sure to subscribe. But one thing is clear, all four of these laptops should provide great performance for just about every use case and better performance than we've ever seen before in a laptop chassis. Now, out of these four laptops, I'm personally, I think, leaning a little more towards the Blade 18 because of the webcam. I would use that in my live streams and all of my online meetings that I do and traveling from conference to conference. So I'm either leaning towards the Blade 18 or maybe downsizing even to a 16-inch laptop. I currently use a 16-inch Legion 7i. Now, once I get all of these in for review and test them, benchmark them, then I'm going to finally decide which of these laptops I'm actually going to keep in the long haul. I don't know. Which one do you think is the best? Which one would you pick if you had an unlimited budget? I'm really curious to hear what you think. So that's it for this episode of Gizmo Slip Tech. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Brandon out.